Station Prometheus hung in the void like a chrome donut, spinning lazily to create artificial gravity for the thousands of alien cadets who called it home. The Galactic Military Academy had been training the galaxy's finest warriors for over 3 centuries, and in all that time they had developed quite the reputation for breaking even the toughest recruits, which made it all the more amusing that their newest cadet was a human. Jake Morrison stepped off the transport shuttle, duffel bag slung over one shoulder, looking around with the kind of wide-eyed enthusiasm that made seasoned drill sergeants everywhere break out in hives. He was average height for a human, which meant he towered over half the station's population and had to duck under doorways designed for the more sensibly sized species. His instructor packet had warned him about this, but nobody had mentioned that the ceiling fans were apparently positioned at exactly human forehead level. Cadet Morrison, report to Training Base 7, announced the station's AI in that special tone reserved for addressing potentially explosive materials. The training bay buzzed with activity as Jake entered. 3 instructors stood waiting for him, each representing a different flavor of galactic authority. Commander Vex, a 7-foot-tall reptilian with scales that shifted colors based on her mood, currently displayed a lovely shade of skeptical green. Her species, the Thrakari, had conquered half a dozen star systems through sheer tactical brilliance and an unfortunate tendency to eat their enemies. Sergeant Core chittered impatiently, his 4 arms crossed in what was either a display of dominance or an attempt to look intimidating. The insectoid Zephyrian had mandibles that could crush steel and a personality to match. His kind had spent millennia perfecting the art of warfare, mostly by fighting everything that moved on their homeworld, including each other. Dr. Luna floated nearby, her ethereal form shimmering like heat waves rising from hot asphalt. The Scion researcher had volunteered to observe the humans training for scientific purposes, though her real motivation seemed to be morbid curiosity about how quickly their new student would wash out. So, Commander Vex began, her scales shifting to a more professional blue-gray. "You are the human." She said it the way someone might announce they had found a particularly interesting species of fungus growing in their shower. "That's me," Jake replied cheerfully, apparently missing the undertone entirely. "Ready to get started. I've been looking forward to this for months." Sergeant Core's mandibles clicked together in what might have been amusement. "Enthusiastic. We shall see how long that lasts." His voice sounded like gravel being processed through a wood chipper. Dr. Luna drifted closer, her form solidifying slightly as she focused her attention. "Fascinating. The human appears to lack the appropriate fear response. Perhaps their fight-or-flight mechanisms are even more primitive than we theorized." "I can hear you," Jake pointed out mildly. "Yes, auditory processing seems normal," Dr. Luna continued, as if Jake had just demonstrated his ability to fetch a stick. Commander Vex consulted her data pad, scales flickering through several shades of bureaucratic irritation. "According to your file, humans require a specialized training regimen. Lower gravity, reduced physical demands, frequent rest periods." She looked up at Jake with the expression of someone who had just been asked to babysit a particularly fragile piece of antique furniture. "Actually," Jake said, "I was hoping we could skip the kid gloves routine. I've been training pretty hard back on Earth, and I'm ready for whatever you've got." The 3 instructors exchanged glances. On their respective homeworlds, new recruits typically spent their first day crying, vomiting, or discovering creative new ways to beg for mercy. This human seemed to think military training was some kind of recreational activity. "We shall begin with basic gravity acclimation," Commander Vex announced. "Standard protocol is 1.2 times your homeworld's gravity." Jake nodded agreeably. "Sounds good. How long does this usually take?" "Most species require several weeks to adjust," Dr. Luna observed, making notes on her floating data tablet. "Though given human physiology, we may need to extend that timeline considerably. Or shorten it," Sergeant Core muttered under his breath. The gravity chamber hummed to life, and Jake felt the familiar sensation of weight settling into his bones. 1.2 Earth gravities felt like putting on a slightly heavy backpack. He bounced experimentally on his toes, testing his range of motion. "Feels pretty normal," he reported. "What's next?" After Jake completed his first day of basic exercises with the enthusiasm of a golden retriever at a tennis ball factory, the 3 instructors gathered in Commander Vex's office for what they diplomatically called a training assessment meeting. What they were actually doing was plotting. "The human is insufferably confident," Sergeant Core declared, his mandibles clicking with annoyance. "He completed the obstacle course without breaking a sweat. Technically, humans do produce perspiration as a cooling mechanism," Dr. Luna corrected. "But yes, his stress indicators remained remarkably low throughout the session." Commander Vex's scales had settled into a contemplative yellow-orange pattern. "Perhaps we have been too gentle. The human clearly expects to be coddled." "What are you suggesting?" Dr. Luna asked, though her ethereal form was already shimmering with interest. "A practical lesson in humility," Vex replied. Tomorrow's solo training session. We increase the gravity to 2.4 standard. Let him discover what real training feels like. Sergeant Core's forearms rubbed together with anticipation. Excellent. Nothing teaches respect like the crushing weight of reality. From a scientific perspective, Dr. Luna added, her form brightening. It would provide valuable data on human limitations. For research purposes, of course. They spent the next hour planning Jake's comeuppance with the kind of attention to detail usually reserved for military campaigns. The gravity chamber would be preset before his arrival. They would observe from the safety of the control booth, ready to dial it back when he inevitably collapsed. It was, they assured themselves, completely harmless, educational, even. How long do you think he will last? Dr. Luna asked, as they finalized their plans. 30 seconds, Sergeant Core predicted confidently. Maybe 45 if he is particularly stubborn. Commander Vex was more generous. I give him 2 minutes before he starts begging us to reduce it. And then he will have learned a valuable lesson about overconfidence, Dr. Luna concluded with satisfaction. The next morning, Jake arrived at Training Bay 7 with the same annoying cheerfulness he had displayed the day before. He whistled something that might have been a human mating call while he changed into his training gear, apparently oblivious to the 3 pairs of eyes watching him through the observation window. Target acquired, Sergeant Core whispered into his communicator, as if Jake might overhear them through soundproof glass from 50 feet away. Gravity generators standing by, Commander Vex confirmed, her finger hovering over the control panel. Dr. Luna positioned herself to record everything, her form practically vibrating with scientific anticipation. This should provide excellent data on human pain responses. Jake stretched briefly, touched his toes a few times, and then looked up at the observation window with a friendly wave. Ready when you are, he called out. The 3 instructors exchanged final glances of conspiracy. This was going to be good. Commander Vex activated the gravity field. The gravity generators spun up with a low hum that Jake felt in his chest. 2.4 times Earth standard hit him like a weighted blanket made of lead, and for a moment the 3 instructors held their breath in anticipation of watching him crumple to the floor like a house of cards in a hurricane. Instead, Jake paused mid-stretch, looked around thoughtfully, and said, did you guys adjust something? This feels different. In the observation booth, Sergeant Core's mandibles stopped clicking. Commander Vex's scales flickered through several shades of confusion. Dr. Luna's ethereal form went completely still. He should be unconscious by now, Core whispered. Maybe humans have a delayed reaction to gravitational stress, Dr. Luna suggested hopefully. Jake completed his stretch, rolled his shoulders a few times, and then did something that made all 3 instructors question their understanding of physics. He started doing jumping jacks. This is actually pretty nice, Jake announced between jumps. Good resistance training. Makes me feel like I'm back in the gym. Commander Vex stared at her control panel as if it had personally betrayed her. The readings are correct. Gravity is at 2.4 standard. Impossible. Sergeant Core hissed. He should be paced by now. Dr. Luna was frantically consulting her datapad, her form flickering with agitation. According to my research, humans evolved on a low-gravity world with minimal atmospheric pressure. They should be among the most fragile species in the galaxy. Down in the training chamber, Jake had moved on to push-ups. Not the slow, labored push-ups of someone fighting against crushing force, but the quick, efficient movements of someone who was genuinely enjoying their workout. You know, Jake called out, apparently addressing the observation window. This is really good. The extra weight makes everything more challenging without being overwhelming. It's like having a personal trainer who actually knows what they're doing. The 3 instructors looked at each other with the expression of people who had just discovered that their carefully planned surprise party was actually being thrown for someone else entirely. Perhaps we should increase the gravity further, Commander Vex suggested weakly. Are you insane? Dr. Luna's form flared brighter. At 3 times standard, even Thrakari warriors start to struggle. Jake had finished his push-ups and moved on to burpees. Burpees. In double gravity, while maintaining a conversation. Hey, quick question, Jake said, not even breathing hard. How high can this thing go? Because I'm feeling pretty good, and I don't want to waste the opportunity for a really solid workout. Sergeant Core made a sound like steam escaping from a broken radiator. He wants more. This is fascinating, Dr. Luna murmured, her scientific interest overriding her horror. The human appears to be thriving under conditions that should be lethal. Commander Vex's scales had cycled through the entire spectrum and were now settling into a pattern that roughly translated to existential dread. She had trained warriors from dozens of species, each adapted to their own particular hellscape of a homeworld. None of them had ever asked for extra gravity like it was a dinner condiment. Jake finished his burpees and looked up at the observation window expectantly. So, what do you think? Can we bump it up to triple? I'm really curious to see what that feels like. There was a long moment of silence in the observation booth. Finally, Dr. Luna spoke in the tone of someone making a profound philosophical observation. I believe we may have made a tactical error. Down in the training chamber, Jake was doing squats and humming what sounded suspiciously like a human victory song. Computer, Dr. Luna commanded, her ethereal form now pulsing with urgent light patterns. Access all available data on human homeworld conditions. Priority 1. The holographic display materialized in front of the 3 stunned instructors, and what they saw made Sergeant Core's chittering sounds reach frequencies that shouldn't have been possible with his species' vocal apparatus. Earth gravity, the computer announced in its maddeningly calm voice, 9.8 meters per second squared. Classification, high gravity world. Commander Vex's scales went through what could only be described as a gravitational panic attack, cycling rapidly between colors that didn't have names in most languages. High gravity. Our intelligence classified it as low gravity. Correction. The computer continued with the enthusiasm of a particularly pedantic librarian. Previous classification based on incomplete data. Updated surveys indicate Earth gravity exceeds galactic standard by significant margin. Dr. Luna's form flickered as she processed this information. Show atmospheric composition. Earth atmosphere 21% oxygen, 78% nitrogen, trace gases. Warning: oxygen concentration exceeds safe levels for most known species. Prolonged exposure may result in oxygen toxicity. They breathe poison, Sergeant Core whispered, all 4 of his arms now trembling. But the computer wasn't finished destroying their worldview. Additional environmental factors: frequent seismic activity, volcanic eruptions, extreme weather patterns including rotating windstorms exceeding 300 km per hour, temperature variations from -80 to +70 degrees Celsius, and electromagnetic radiation from local star causing cellular damage without protective measures. Commander Vex sat down heavily in her chair, which creaked under the sudden weight of someone having an existential crisis. They evolved on a death world. It gets worse, Dr. Luna said faintly, her research diving deeper into human evolutionary history. Computer, display human recreational activities. The hologram shifted to show various human pastimes, each more terrifying than the last. Rock climbing, skydiving, something called cage fighting, that appeared to involve humans deliberately attempting to render each other unconscious for entertainment purposes. This cannot be accurate, Sergeant Core protested. No sane species engages in voluntary combat for amusement. Cross-reference with human athletic competitions, Dr. Luna commanded. New images appeared, humans running for hours without stopping, lifting weights that would crush smaller species, swimming vast distances through bodies of water filled with predators. One particularly disturbing video showed humans participating in something called a marathon, where they voluntarily ran 26 miles, and some of them were smiling. They pursued hunt, Commander Vex realized with growing horror. Like the ancient predators of Thraken Prime, before we evolved intelligence and stopped doing insane things. Down in the training chamber, Jake had moved on to mountain climbers, his movements still fluid and controlled despite the doubled gravity. He looked like he was having the time of his life. Computer, Dr. Luna's voice cracked slightly. What is the human concept of going easy? Human physiological studies indicate standard practice of operating at 60 to 70% of maximum capacity during routine activities to maintain energy reserves for emergency situations. The 3 instructors stared at Jake through the observation window with new understanding. He wasn't struggling because he was barely trying. This was Jake on cruise control. Oh, stars preserve us, Commander Vex whispered. We've been treating him like he's fragile. Word was beginning to spread throughout the station. Other cadets had started gathering at the observation windows of adjacent training bays, pressed against the glass like they were watching some kind of exotic and dangerous animal at a zoo. A Centaurian cadet pointed with 2 of his 6 arms at Jake's latest exercise routine. Is that human doing one-armed push-ups in double gravity? The Centaurian asked his companion, a crystalline being from the Andromeda sector. I believe so, the crystal being replied, their entire body structure resonating with harmonics of disbelief. My species requires mechanical assistance to function in anything above standard gravity, and he appears to be treating it as a warm-up. A small crowd was forming. Galactic Military Academy cadets from dozens of species, many of whom had never seen a human before, were now witnessing Jake casually redefine their understanding of what was physically possible. He just asked for more gravity, someone whispered from the back of the crowd. More, how much more? Triple. The crowd fell silent, except for the various breathing, clicking, humming and crystalline ringing sounds that passed for worried murmurs among the galaxy's diverse species. Back in the observation booth, Commander Vex was staring at her control panel like it might bite her. We can't actually give him triple gravity. That would be 3.6 times Earth standard. Even our emergency protocols don't go that high. The training chamber is rated for up to 4 times standard, Dr. Luna pointed out helpfully. That's for equipment testing, not biological entities, Sergeant Core protested. At triple gravity, his internal organs should liquefy. Dr. Luna's research had uncovered another disturbing fact. According to this data, human athletes regularly subject themselves to forces exceeding 5 times their body weight during training. They call it plyometrics and consider it normal conditioning. Jake had finished his mountain climbers, and was now doing something that looked suspiciously like a handstand, in double gravity, while maintaining perfect balance. You know what? Jake called out cheerfully, this is really hitting the spot. I haven't had a workout this good since I left Earth. Are you guys sure we can't try triple? Commander Vex looked at her fellow instructors. Dr. Luna's ethereal form was pulsing with the kind of morbid scientific curiosity that had driven her species to map 17 different types of supernovas. Sergeant Core's mandibles were clicking in a rhythm that suggested he was either very excited or having some kind of mechanical failure. From a purely research standpoint, Dr. Luna said slowly, we would be gathering unprecedented data on human capabilities. It could be valuable for future human integration protocols, Commander Vex added, though her scales were still cycling through shades of uncertainty. Sergeant Core's clicking had resolved into what might have been laughter. Either we make history, or we make very educational wreckage. The crowd of alien cadets pressed closer to the windows. Someone had started taking bets on whether the human would survive triple gravity. The odds were not in Jake's favor, but nobody wanted to miss what was either going to be the most impressive display of physical capability in Academy history, or the most spectacular failure. Jake bounced on his toes, still looking fresh as a daisy despite having just completed a workout that should have hospitalized him. So? He asked expectantly. What do you say? Commander Vex's finger hovered over the gravity controls like it was the trigger of a weapon of mass destruction. Which, considering what they now knew about human capabilities, it might as well have been. Last chance to reconsider, she said to her fellow instructors, her scales now a sickly shade of green that roughly translated to why did I sign up for this job? For science, Dr. Luna declared, though her ethereal form was flickering with what could only be described as scientific terror. Sergeant Core had given up on coherent speech, and was simply clicking his mandibles in a rhythm that sounded suspiciously like a funeral dirge. The crowd of alien cadets had grown to nearly 50 beings, representing every major species in the Academy. Someone had brought popcorn, or at least the Rigelian equivalent, which appeared to be some kind of crystallized fear pheromone that crunched when you bit it. Attention all cadets, came the announcement over the station's intercom system. Training Bay 7 is now under observation protocol. Please maintain safe distance from observation windows in case of structural failure. Jake, blissfully unaware that he had become the center of a potentially catastrophic scientific experiment, was doing stretches that looked like they belonged in some sort of human flexibility ritual. His casual limbering up routine was causing several cadets to question their understanding of basic anatomy. Is his spine supposed to bend like that? Whispered a Vulcarian engineer, whose own species was essentially a collection of crystalline formations held together by electromagnetic fields. I don't think anything is supposed to bend like that, replied his companion, a gaseous being from the nebula sector who was having trouble maintaining his molecular cohesion from the stress. Commander Vex took a deep breath, which was unfortunate because the observation booth's atmosphere recyclers were having trouble processing the various panic pheromones being released by 50 different species simultaneously. Initiating gravity increase to triple standard, she announced. May the cosmic forces have mercy on us all. The gravity generators spun up with a sound like the universe clearing its throat. 3.6 times Earth gravity slammed into Jake like a massive invisible hand trying to push him through the floor, and for one terrible moment, every alien in the observation area held their breath. Jake's knees buckled slightly. The crowd collectively gasped, clicked, hummed, or emitted whatever sound their species made when witnessing imminent disaster. Then Jake straightened up, rolled his shoulders experimentally, and broke into the biggest grin anyone had seen since the great happiness plague of Sector 7. Now we're talking, he said with genuine enthusiasm. This is what I'm talking about. This feels like a real workout. In the observation booth, Dr. Luna's form went completely transparent for a moment before snapping back to visibility. He's enjoying it more. Jake began with some basic movements, testing his range of motion under the increased gravity. What he was doing wasn't particularly impressive by human standards, just basic calisthenics, but to the assembled alien cadets, it looked like watching someone casually juggle neutron stars. Basic push-ups, Jake announced, as if he were leading an exercise class. He dropped down and began a set of perfect form push-ups in triple gravity. This is fantastic resistance training. Really makes you work for it. A Zephyrian cadet in the crowd started hyperventilating, which for his species involved rapid antenna movements that looked like semaphore signals. He's doing them faster than I can do them in normal gravity. Jake moved on to squats, his form textbook perfect despite the crushing weight trying to compress him into a human pancake. You know, back on Earth, we have these things called weighted vests that add resistance to workouts. This is like having the ultimate weighted vest that covers your entire body. It's brilliant. Weighted vests, Commander Vex repeated faintly. They voluntarily add weight to make exercise harder. The human concept of recreation is deeply disturbing, Sergeant Core observed, his mandibles clicking in patterns that suggested he was either impressed or having some kind of breakdown. But Jake was just getting started. He moved into what he cheerfully announced as burpees, which involved dropping to the ground doing a push-up, jumping his feet back under him, and then leaping into the air. In triple gravity, this should have been physically impossible for any known species. Jake made it look like a dance routine. The gravitational force should be preventing vertical movement entirely, Dr. Luna said, her scientific worldview crumbling in real time. He's generating enough force to overcome 3.6 times his body weight, plus the additional downward acceleration. The power output required is, she paused to run calculations on her floating datapad. Impossible, she finished weakly. The crowd had grown silent, except for the various physiological sounds of different species processing terror. Someone had started a new betting pool, this time on whether Jake was actually human, or some kind of mechanical construct designed to look like one. Mountain climbers next, Jake announced, getting into a plank position. What followed was a display of core strength and endurance that made several cadets question whether they had chosen the right career path. Jake's mountain climbers in triple gravity were more intense than most species' full-contact combat training. How long can he maintain this level of activity? Commander Vex asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Dr. Luna consulted her research. Human endurance athletes have been documented maintaining high-intensity activity for hours. Some have completed what they call ultra-marathons covering distances of over 100 miles. 100 miles, Sergeant Core repeated. Running. For fun, apparently, yes. Jake had moved on to single-leg squats, balancing on one foot while lowering and raising his body weight in conditions that should have made standing upright a challenge. His balance was perfect, his breathing controlled, and his commentary ongoing. This is really working my stabilizer muscles, he said conversationally. You don't get this kind of proprioceptive challenge in normal gravity. It's like having a personal trainer who really knows what they're doing. A Centaurian cadet turned to his neighbor, a being that looked like a mobile crystal formation. What are stabilizer muscles? I don't know, the crystal being replied, but apparently humans have them, and they work better under crushing gravitational forces. Jake finished his single-leg squats, and moved into what he described as plyometric exercises. The first was something called a box jump, except there was no box, so he was essentially doing standing vertical jumps in triple gravity. Each jump launched him nearly 2 feet into the air, which represented a power output that was making the physics professors in the crowd question their understanding of basic mechanics. The energy expenditure alone should have exhausted him by now. Doctor, Luna murmured, her form flickering between various states of scientific crisis. He's been active for over 30 minutes in triple gravity, maintaining high-intensity exercise that would kill most species in normal gravity. Jake landed from another jump, barely breathing hard, and looked up at the observation window with the expression of someone who had just discovered their new favorite hobby. This is incredible, he called out. I can really feel it working. How long can I have the chamber for? Because I'm just getting warmed up. The crowd of alien cadets exchanged glances that ranged from awe to existential terror. Someone in the back whispered what everyone was thinking. Warmed up? He's just getting warmed up? Commander Vex's scales had progressed beyond the normal spectrum, and were now displaying colors that didn't technically exist in most star systems. He wants to continue. For how long? Sergeant Core asked, though his chittering suggested he didn't really want an answer. Jake had moved on to handstand push-ups, casually inverting his body, and doing vertical presses in triple gravity, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Each repetition represented a feat of strength that would have been legendary among most species, and he was doing them in sets of 20. You know, Jake said, between repetitions, upside down and apparently having a casual conversation, this reminds me of training back home. We had this gym teacher who used to make us do workouts wearing weighted backpacks, said it would make us appreciate normal conditions more. I think he was onto something. Dr. Luna's research had uncovered another disturbing fact about human culture. Computer, what is the human concept of physical education? Human educational systems routinely include mandatory physical training for developing individuals. Common activities include running long distances, lifting heavy objects, and competitive combat sports. They train their children like this, Commander Vex said in a voice that suggested she was having a profound realization about the nature of reality. It's not training. Dr. Luna corrected, her form now pulsing with horrified fascination. It's conditioning. They're conditioning their young to thrive in impossible conditions. Jake finished his handstand push-ups, and flipped back to his feet with the casual grace of someone who had just completed a basic stretching routine. He looked around the training chamber with the satisfaction of someone who had finally found a gym that met his standards. So, he said, grinning up at the observation window. What's next on the schedule? Because I've got to say, this is the best workout I've had since I left Earth. There was a moment of absolute silence in Training Bay 7 that stretched across the entire observation deck. 50 alien cadets from dozens of species stood frozen in various states of shock, their breathing apparatus, mandibles, crystalline formations, and gaseous emanations all completely still. Even the station's environmental systems seemed to pause, as if the universe itself needed a moment to process what it had just witnessed. Commander Vex stared at her control panel, her scales now cycling through colors that shouldn't have been possible according to Thrakari physiology. Next on the schedule, she repeated slowly, as if the words were in a language she'd never heard before. Jake wiped some sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, the first sign of exertion he'd shown during the entire session. Yeah, I mean, this was great for cardio and strength training, but I'm wondering if you've got any equipment for flexibility work. Maybe some weights? I'd love to see what the gym facilities are like here. Doctor. Luna's ethereal form had been flickering between dimensions for the past 10 minutes, but now it stabilized into something that resembled barely controlled panic. Equipment? You want additional resistance? Well, sure, Jake said reasonably. This gravity thing is fantastic, but back home I usually combine cardio with some weight training. Really helps with overall conditioning. Sergeant Core made a sound like a garbage disposal trying to process a titanium spoon. Conditioning. He wants to add conditioning to what he just did. Jake stretched his arms over his head, a casual movement that in triple gravity should have required the kind of core strength that most species use to move small moons. Oh, and I should probably mention, I'm still taking it pretty easy. I'm recovering from leg day earlier this week, so I didn't want to push too hard on my first day. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud, recovering from leg day, taking it easy, didn't want to push too hard. Commander Vex's finger slowly, very slowly, moved away from the gravity controls as if they had suddenly become radioactive. Leg day? Yeah, you know, focused lower body workout. Squats, deadlifts, lunges, that sort of thing. Really went all out on Tuesday, so I figured I'd keep today's session moderate. Jake rolled his ankles experimentally. Though I have to say, this triple gravity thing is making me feel pretty good. Maybe I was being too conservative. Doctor. Luna's research pad slipped from her ethereal grasp and clattered to the floor of the observation booth. Conservative. He considers what we just witnessed to be conservative. Computer. Commander Vex said in a voice that suggested she was about to ask a question she really didn't want answered. Define human leg day training protocols. The computer, with its infinite capacity for destroying people's understanding of reality, cheerfully complied. Human leg day typically involves high-intensity lower body exercises, including squats with additional weight, deadlifts exceeding body weight, and plyometric exercises. Advanced practitioners commonly lift 2 to 3 times their body weight for multiple repetitions. 2 to 3 times body weight, Sergeant Core repeated. In addition to their planet's high gravity. Affirmative. Human strength training protocols frequently involve resistance exceeding normal gravitational forces by significant margins. Jake had started doing some light stretching, which in triple gravity looked like a demonstration of flexibility that defied several laws of physics. You know, I'm really impressed with your facilities here. Most gyms don't have adjustable gravity. This opens up so many training possibilities. The crowd of alien cadets had begun to disperse, but not because they'd lost interest. Several were backing away slowly, as if Jake might suddenly decide to demonstrate what he considered a real workout. Others were taking frantic notes, apparently trying to document what they'd witnessed for their respective species' military intelligence services. A small group of Centaurian engineering students were huddled together, frantically running calculations on their shared datapad. One of them looked up with the expression of someone who had just solved an equation and really wished they hadn't. Based on the power output we observed, the Centaurian announced to his companions, if the human was indeed operating at reduced capacity, his maximum theoretical performance would exceed the structural limits of most starship hulls. This information spread through the remaining crowd like a virus, each species translating the implications through their own understanding of physics and coming to the same terrifying conclusion. They had been sharing a space station with what was essentially a bipedal weapon of mass destruction, who thought gravity was a recreational activity. Commander Vex stood up slowly, her scales now displaying what could only be described as bureaucratic resignation mixed with existential acceptance. "Cadet Morrison," she said, her voice carrying the weight of someone making a decision that would probably appear in military academy textbooks for centuries. "Report to advanced combat training tomorrow at 0800 hours. "Advanced?" Jake asked, looking pleased. "That sounds great. What kind of stuff will we be covering?" "Everything," Sergeant Core said faintly. "We will be covering everything." Dr. Luna had recovered enough to float back to her research station, though her form was still flickering with what appeared to be scientific PTSD. "I need to file a report with the Galactic Physiology Council. Our entire understanding of human capabilities requires immediate revision." "What kind of revision?" Commander Vex asked, though she suspected she didn't want to know. "Complete reclassification, Doctor." Luna replied, her voice taking on the tone of someone making a historic announcement. "Humans are no longer to be categorized as a fragile support species suitable for low-intensity operations." She paused to consult her notes, though her hands were shaking slightly. "New classification, humans are to be designated as a Class 7 autonomous combat unit, with recommended deployment protocols for extreme environment operations, high-intensity combat scenarios, and situations requiring impossible physical performance standards. Class 7. Commander Vex's scales went through what could only be described as a rainbow of horror. "That's the same classification as orbital bombardment platforms." "The classification appears to be appropriate, Doctor," Luna said with the calm of someone who had moved beyond panic into a state of scientific acceptance. Jake finished his stretching routine and looked around the training chamber with satisfaction. "This was really great, thanks. Same time tomorrow." "Same time tomorrow," Commander Vex confirmed, though her voice suggested she was already planning to update her personal insurance policy. As Jake headed for the exit, he paused and looked back at the observation window with a friendly wave. "Oh, one more thing. Do you guys have a cafeteria around here? All this light exercise is making me hungry." Light exercise. The phrase echoed through the observation booth, like the dying words of their previous understanding of reality. After Jake left, the three instructors sat in silence for several minutes, each processing what they had witnessed in their own way. Finally, Sergeant Core spoke up. "We are going to need a bigger training facility." Commander Vex nodded slowly. "And possibly a smaller planet, Doctor." Luna was already drafting her report to the Galactic Command, starting with a recommendation that all future human recruits be issued their own warning labels and possibly their own zip codes. Outside in the corridor, Jake whistled cheerfully as he headed toward what he hoped was the cafeteria, completely unaware that he had just redefined the Academy's understanding of what was physically possible and fundamentally altered humanity's place in galactic civilization. He was already looking forward to tomorrow's workout.